For 7 days, the little girl sat on the same old wooden board in the middle of Black Creek Market. Every morning, merchants opened their shops. Every afternoon, cowboys walked through the dusty streets. Every evening, families returned home before the cold wind arrived, and every single day, they saw her. A tiny 7-year-old girl sitting alone near the old market square. Her name was Lily Harper. She wore a faded blue dress with patches sewn into the torn fabric. Her small boots were cracked from years of use, and her thin hands were wrapped around an old cloth doll that had lost one eye and most of its stuffing. But Lily never let go of it, because it was the last thing her mother had made for her. The little girl never shouted, never begged, never chased strangers for help. She simply sat there quietly, waiting. Some people felt sorry for her, some people whispered about her, but most people did what people often do when suffering becomes too uncomfortable to face: they looked away. "Someone should help that child," one merchant said. Another man replied, "Someone probably will." But days passed, and nobody did. The winter of 1884 had been cruel to the small Montana town of Black Creek. Snow covered the rooftops, the wooden streets were frozen every morning, the smell of fresh bread, horses, and burning fireplaces filled the old frontier market. But among all the noise and movement, Lily remained silent. She sat on that broken wooden board, near the closed blacksmith shop, holding her little doll and staring at the road, because her mother had told her something before they were separated. "Lily, don't be afraid. A kind person will find you." Those words were the only reason she stayed, the only reason she still believed tomorrow could be different. That same afternoon, a lonely rancher rode into town. His name was Elias Carter, 40 years old, a man with a strong reputation across the Montana Valley. He owned a large ranch outside Black Creek, and was known as someone who could handle wild horses, survive dangerous winters, and face trouble without fear. But behind his tough appearance was a man carrying a lifetime of pain. 5 years earlier, Elias lost his wife and young daughter during a harsh winter sickness. Since then his ranch had become a place of work, not a home. He returned every night to empty rooms. He ate every meal alone, and he convinced himself that loneliness was easier than losing someone again. Elias entered the market that afternoon to buy supplies. As he tied his horse near the general store, he noticed something unusual. The entire market was moving around one small corner, but nobody was going near it. Elias followed the people's eyes, and then he saw her, a little girl, alone sitting on a broken wooden board. The cold wind moved through her thin clothes, her small doll was pressed against her chest. Elias looked around. A woman walked past carrying groceries. A man stepped around her without saying a word. The shopkeeper closed his door because the child was standing too close. Something inside Elias tightened. He had seen loneliness before, because he had lived with it. Slowly, he walked toward her. "Litty, one." The girl looked up. Her eyes were tired, but she didn't cry. Elias removed his gloves. "How long have you been sitting here?" The girl looked down at her doll. No answer. Elias noticed her hands. They were freezing. Without hesitation, he removed his heavy ranch coat and placed it around her shoulders. The girl looked surprised. "You will be cold," she whispered. Elias gave a small smile. "I've survived worse winters than this." For a moment, Lily just stared at him. Then she asked a question that stopped him completely. "Are you going to leave too?" Elias became quiet. Because that wasn't the question of a child asking about a stranger. That was the question of someone who had already been abandoned too many times. "No," Elias answered softly. "Not today." The girl held her doll tighter. "Everyone leaves." Elias looked at her, then he said, "Maybe some people do." A pause. "But some people stay." Before Elias could ask more, a shadow fell across them. A wealthy man stood nearby. His name was Victor Langford, the most powerful businessman in Black Creek. His expensive black coat, polished boots, looked completely out of place among ordinary townspeople. His eyes moved from Elias to Lily. "There you are." The little girl froze. Her fingers tightened around the doll. Elias noticed the fear immediately. "You know this man?" Lily said nothing, but her silence answered everything. Victor stepped closer. "That child is not your concern, Carter." Elias stood up. "She became my concern the moment everyone else decided she wasn't." The market went silent. Nobody spoke to Victor Langford like that. Victor's face hardened. "You don't understand what you're protecting." Elias looked back at Lily, a frightened child, a broken doll, a girl nobody wanted to notice. Then he looked at Victor. "Maybe I don't." He stepped between them. "But I know what I'm not going to do." "What?" "Walk away." That evening, Elias brought Lily to his ranch. The old wooden house was quiet as always. But something felt different. Lily sat beside the fireplace, still holding her doll. Elias placed a warm meal in front of her. "You don't have to say anything." The girl looked up. "You don't?" Elias shook his head. He smiled gently. "Sometimes people need someone to sit beside them more than they need questions." For the first time in 7 Lily smiled, a small smile, but real. And she reached inside her doll's torn fabric and pulled out a tiny folded paper. Elias looked at it. "What's that?" Lily whispered. "My mama told me never to show it to anyone." She looked toward the window. "Unless someone truly kind found me." Elias slowly opened the paper. And the moment he read the first line, his expression changed, because the message was connected to the most dangerous secret in Black Creek. And Victor Langford would destroy anyone who tried to reveal it. Elias Carter stared at the small piece of paper in his hands. The handwriting was uneven, the ink was faded. But the message was clear. It was a warning. "If anything happens to me, protect Lily. Do not let Victor Langford find the ledger." Elias read the words again, then he looked at the little girl sitting beside the fireplace, 7 years old, alone in the middle of a crowded market, carrying a secret she was never supposed to understand. "Lily," Elias asked quietly, "who is Victor Langford?" The little girl lowered her eyes. "My mama told me never to say his name." "Why?" Her small voice trembled. "Because bad things happen to people who talk about him." Elias looked toward the dark window. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. But something felt colder than the winter air. Fear. Years earlier, Elias had learned that some men didn't need weapons to hurt people. Some used money, some used power, and some used fear. Victor Langford was that kind of man. He owned businesses across Montana, he controlled land, he controlled people, and anyone who stood against him usually disappeared. Elias folded the paper carefully. "Lily, where is your mother?" The little girl looked at her old doll. "She told me to wait in the market." "When?" 7 days ago." Elias felt his chest tighten. 7 days. A child had been sitting alone, believing someone would come back. He understood that feeling, waiting for someone, hoping, and slowly realizing they might never return. The next morning, Elias took Lily back to Black Creek, not because he wanted to, because he needed answers. They walked through the market together, and for the first time, people noticed something different. The little girl wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't invisible. She held Elias's hand as they passed the same merchants who had ignored her. Some looked ashamed, some looked away, but Elias didn't care. He had made his choice. At the old general store, Elias met an old newspaper owner named Samuel Reed. When Samuel saw Lily, his face changed. "Where did you find her?" Elias answered, "Right where everyone else left her." Samuel looked down. Guilt filled his eyes. Then Elias placed the note on the table. The old man's hands started shaking. "Where did you get this?" "From her doll." Samuel closed the door, lowered his voice. "Lily's father worked for Langford." Elias became still. Samuel looked around carefully. He discovered Langford was stealing land from poor ranch families. He kept records. Proof. And Samuel swallowed before he could expose him. He vanished. Elias looked at Lily. She was quietly holding her doll near the window. She had lost everything. And she didn't even know why. That evening, Elias returned to the ranch, but something was wrong. The barn door was open, the horses were restless. Elias immediately reached for his rifle. "Lily, stay behind me." They moved slowly toward the house. Inside, everything had been searched. Records were open, papers were scattered. Someone had been looking for something. Elias noticed something on the floor, the small cloth doll. Lily ran toward it. No, she picked it up carefully. The doll was torn. Someone had searched inside it. But they didn't find what they were looking for, because Lily was already holding the hidden message. Elias looked at the damage. Victor Langford wasn't just watching them. He was hunting them. That night, Elias sat beside the fireplace while Lily slept. He watched the little girl holding her broken doll. He thought about his own daughter, the same age when he lost her, the same fear in her eyes, the same need for someone to protect her. For years, Elias believed his chance to have a family was gone forever, but maybe life had placed Lily in his path for a reason. The next morning, Elias made a decision. He wasn't just protecting Lily anymore. He was fighting for her. Victor Langford arrived at the ranch before sunset. This time, he came with armed men. He stopped outside the cabin. "Carter." Elias walked onto the porch. Lily stood behind him. Victor looked amused. "You really think you can stop me?" Elias looked at the men behind him, then at Victor. No, Victor smiled. Good, because you finally understand. Elias shook his head. I understand something else. What? People like you win because everyone is afraid to stand alone. Victor's smile faded. And you? Elias looked behind him. Across the snowy field, either ranchers appeared, the families who had lost their land, the people who had stayed silent for years. But not anymore. You made one mistake, Langford. Victor narrowed his eyes. What mistake? Elias stepped forward. You thought nobody would care about one little girl. Silence filled the ranch. Then Samuel Reed arrived carrying the evidence, the hidden records, the proof. Everything Victor had spent years hiding. Months later, Black Creek changed forever. Victor Langford's crimes were exposed, the stolen lands were returned, the people who had been afraid finally found their voices. And the little girl who once sat alone in the middle of the market never sat alone again. Spring arrived at Elias Carter's ranch, the fields became green, the horses ran freely, and the old empty house finally had laughter again. One evening, Lily sat beside Elias on the porch. She held her little cloth doll. You know something? Elias smiled. What? When I was sitting in the market, she looked at him. I thought nobody saw me. Elias looked at the sunset. I saw you. Lily smiled. No, she shook her head gently. You didn't just see me. A pause. You stopped. Elias looked away, hiding his emotion, because she was right. Anyone could notice someone suffering, but it took a special kind of person to stop, to care, to stay. And that was the day a lonely rancher discovered something he thought he had lost forever: a family, a home, and a reason to believe again. The silent orphan was ignored by everyone, until one man stepped forward.